Okay, today we are going to do an introduction to the Rocker Dude assignment. I'm going to go down a few of the requirements of the assignment, at least the creative part of it, and show you an example of what it'll look like in the end. If you go to Canvas and you go to the assignment, see, like I say, I do everything through the calendar. On the 2nd of March, this is due. I'm going to be out of town that day, so you'll be working on your own that day and then turning it in that night.
Oh shoot! There goes my feedback.
In the assignment, there's this rockerdude.zip file. You can download that and open it up, and then there it is in my downloads folder. Rockerdude. There's a Word file with the instructions, and that's basically the same thing as what you're seeing here. They're pretty much the same thing. 2 weeks ago when I explained the puppet tool, I showed you how to puppet the Rocker Dude and make his hips jive and make his hands flail around. So that's part of the assignment. Another part of the assignment is in the very beginning, these first part A is a really detailed, pretty specific set of instructions. So you can follow those exactly and you'll get these rays. See, there's a lens flare in the middle of it, and then these rays are rotating behind the lens flare at slightly different speeds to create that sort of 3-4 toned ray in the background that changes size. Okay. Alright, so let's take a look at the zip file. Here's my Rocker Dude. Let's go and turn Rocker Dude into my project folder. So inside Rocker Dude, I'm going to make a new folder and call this one Graphics. So I've got my Sky Rays, I got my Peace and Love, I got my Rocker Dude, and I got my Rocker Hand. Right, so inside the Rocker Dude folder, I'm going to create another folder for After Effects. I'm pretty sure for this assignment that's all you need. Actually, no, just kidding. There's another part of this assignment, and that is either exports or drafts. Okay. Because we are going to export a video file for this assignment. The video file is what you're going to send to me. You're not going to send the project file, you're not going to send the graphics, you're just going to send your exported video. Okay? So you can do drafts, you can do a drafts folder and a finals folder. I would probably put those inside your exports folder. That way you can do your trial and error in your drafts folder, and then when you have your version that you want to upload and send to me, put that in your final folder so you can keep track and you know which one is your final. One thing that I do when I'm exporting is if I have a final and then I make changes and I make a new file which I could call my final, I don't start calling it final, 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 final for real, this is the real final, final absolute final. You know, I don't do that with the file name. If I do a new final, I will take my most recent draft and stick it in the drafts folder rather than the finals folder. Okay, that way you don't have to like have final underscore date and then just keep track of all your finals, because if you're still exporting and refining your project, it's not a final anymore, you know, until it's the actual final.
Hey, which file
I said final about 20 times.
Sky Rays go into again?
Sky Rays and all those graphics I sent you can go in the graphics folder. So I
Okay.
put Sky Rays, Rocker Vector, Rocker Dude, Peace and Love. All right, so now let's go into, let's just open up each of these and take a look at what these graphics are. So I'm going to open up the skyrays.psd first. Maybe? Skyrays PSD. Okay. So this Photoshop file is a single layer, but it's actually a vector smart object. So if you've learned a little bit about how vector smart objects work in Photoshop, you could actually get the vector off of this and be able to scale it up forever and ever. But if I hit Command Option I can see how big this is. It's 1178 by 1177. I believe the assignment is to make a standard definition video, which is 720 by 480. So this file is going to be plenty big. There's enough resolution in it that I can just use the PSD. Okay, so we've taken a look at that. I'm not going to save it. I'm going to tab back over to Finder, take a look at rocker hand vector. Rocker hand vector, it looks like, is two layers. One is a vector smart object that's been rasterized, because I don't have the little smart symbol in this thumbnail right here. And then the other one's just a black or a white solid background. And if I hit Command Option I, take a look at how big this one is in pixels. It's 1200 by 750. So again, that's plenty of pixels to work with for standard definition video.
But what if?
So this is what I do. Whenever I'm given a project and I'm given a bunch of graphics, I open them up to see how big they are, how they're made, how they're built, what they're made of. So here I've got Rocker Dude. We worked with Rocker Dude last week, and he's a vector file. He's got plenty of, because he's a vector file, he's got plenty of resolution, so we don't need to work with him again. But let's take a look at the Peace and Love Illustrator. Oh, and remember me going on a rant about Final Cut having, or After Effects having a bug in it that doesn't refresh the screen once you hit undo? They fixed it like the next day in an update. So yay! Unfortunately, these computers don't get updated till the end of the semester. I'm going to put in a request though that they be updated, because that's a horrible thing. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I have in this one Illustrator a bunch of layers. Now here's, if you've had if you've been exposed to Illustrator already, you'll know that every path is its own object. No matter what the layer stacking, you can grab that one path. This is a group, this flower is a group, but you could grab this one path and move it, but they're technically, this petal and this petal, they're all part of the same layer. They're all together. So what that means is, even though it's made up of several paths, this flower is going to import into After Effects as one object. Not because it's grouped, but because all the paths for that flower are on the same layer. Okay? If for some reason the middle of this flower were accidentally on a separate layer, it would come in as a separate object from the rest of the flower. Okay, so let me show you what I mean by layers. If you go over to your layer panel, all these different layers, if you toggle them on and off, their visibility, look at all these fun objects in here. Because I turned this one on, that is going to be an object when it comes into After Effects. Same with this one, same with this one, and etc., etc., etc. And as the King and I would say. Good. You guys know the King and I?
Oh,
Okay. Well, go watch the King and I, and not the one with Jodie Foster.
which version?
Not the one, the old one.
What year is it?
Etc. 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 when was it, the 50s or 60s? Okay. Anyway, if you wanted to, you could, if you wanted to separate the middle of a flower, you would have to create a new layer and then call it, you know, blue flower middle, and hit enter, and then you could, with the one path selected, you could grab this little dot, move it up there, and it put it on its own layer, made it its own object. All right, but since this isn't an Illustrator class, let's see what this does when we import it into After Effects. I'm not going to save that. I'm just going to keep it the way it is. Quit Illustrator, quit Photoshop. Now let's go to After Effects. I did a new project. It's probably a good idea to save this before you get going, so at least you've got a project going. I'm going to save it as Rocker Dude. This is in my downloads folder. Hopefully this is in your guys' external hard drive in your 3634 class folder. But there it is, my After Effects folder, Rocker Dude.
Is this how we exactly save it?
Yes, it's a good idea to save it just like this. Except for don't name your name Scott Halford.
I meant besides that.
Right. Okay. Command I, it to import, right? So we're going to import, and I'm going to navigate to this, to the graphics folder, and I'm going to import the peaceandlove.ai file first. Now I want all of those layers to come in as separate objects. If I leave my import kind as footage, it's going to import the entire Illustrator file as one graphic. And I don't want that. I want a composition, and I want my footage dimensions to be the layer size. So it's pretty similar to the Photoshop file, import and then retain layer sizes. It's just a slightly different dialog box. But if I click OK there, then I will get a composition symbol, and inside, if I double click on that, it'll open up and I can see every one of these flowers. If I toggle the visibility on and off, the sun, the peace sign, the other yin yang, happy guys, another one of those, smiley flower. Okay, so each one of those came in as their own object. So even though each of those in the Illustrator file is made up of several paths, in After Effects they come in as one object per layer. So if you accidentally, when you're building your Illustrator file, if you accidentally put a petal from one flower on the same layer as another flower, it'll come in on the wrong object. So if it comes in and you have some random thing over here that's moving around with this layer, then you might need to go into your Illustrator and restack it into the appropriate layer. All right, something that you've probably discovered in your book already is with vector files, which Illustrator files are, you can, I'm just on this layer 3, this small flower, you can scale up a vector file. And because After Effects works in pixels, you get a pixelated image. But if you go to your toggle switches modes button down at the bottom of your timeline so that you see these columns, if you click on this star, underneath this star, that's the continually rasterize. So if it's a vector file, a vector layer, and you click on that layer, or that box right there, no matter how big you scale that up, it'll redraw the vector file so that it'll stay crisp. It's a nice feature. That way you don't have to worry too much about how big the Illustrator file is. You can always just scale it up. Now, if you start getting really big, it'll be kind of a processor hog. So there does come a point where the vector graphics can be a little too small. All right, so there's your peace and love. Here's all your peace and love layers inside inside this folder here. So I brought it in as a composition, but chances are pretty good you're going to bring in one of these objects individually. All right, so let's collapse that down. Let's create a new comp, and let's use the preset NTSC DV. I think. Let me make sure I'm right here. NTSC DV preset. And I'm going to call this one raise. Going to make the animation 5 seconds? 5 seconds long, and then click OK. Now let's import the raise Photoshop file. Command I, skyraise.psd, click open. It's only one layer, so I'm just going to import this as footage. I'm surprised it didn't do that automatically since it's only one layer. Then inside, if I drop this down into my composition panel, I can scale it. But that's a pretty uniform object. All right, I'm not going to show you how to do the raise animation. Just know that there is some rotation involved. So I'll do that rotation. I'll just let that rotate like that. All right, now I've done this raise rotation. That's not the actual rotation, or that's not the actual raise animation. Follow the instructions in the assignment to do that. So we have this raise. Let's create another new composition. Same settings, but we'll call this one Rocker Dude. And then one thing you might want to do is call this one Master, because he's going to be our master comp. Click OK. Now here's the principle of the nesting. The book has done this a little bit, but this raise animation that we made, we now bring this down into the master composition, and it becomes an object that is self-animating. Okay, so the animation still happens, but it's now an object that we can move around and scale it down. There. All you do is bring that, you just drag it down into the, you bring the raise composition into the Rocker Dude composition, just like it were any other graphic. Okay, that's what nesting is. That's the definition of nesting. You just treat this composition as though it's another graphic. So now you could lock this raise layer. Now it becomes the background. I can't click or drag it around because it's locked. Now I can do all my animations on top of that layer, and it just is the background. Okay. Let me do. So there's a few things you have to do. You have to make the rocker hands, the vector hands, kind of do a little rocker thing in the background. So I'm going to import this as footage. So at some point the rocker hand is going to need to come in, be really big. You'll probably want to put the anchor point down here so that it can rock out like this. Woohoo! Okay. You'll want the animation to do this. Another thing you're going to want to do is using several of these peace and love layers. We're just go back to Woodstock, man. Just do cool stuff with these graphics. Make them be psychedelic. Just have fun with them. There is a requirement to do something using 3D. So I'm going to do something fun. I'm going to create another pre-comp. So I'm going to make a new composition. This one I'm going to make more like 300 pixels by 300 pixels. And I want these pixels to be square pixels. So I'll click OK. And I'm gonna do a little happy face turn spinning. So we got this happy face, and we've got this happy face. I'm gonna put them right on top of each other. Now, what I'm gonna do right now would satisfy like the minimum for your 3D requirement for this assignment, okay? Actually, let me turn one of these off. If I make this one 3D, and then I do a rotation on the Y value, and just make it turn around a couple of times, so I'm going to do ×2. Okay? That's like the bare minimum you could do to satisfy your 3D requirement for this. All right, if that's all you do, I'll give you like a point and say, well, they checked that off the list, but you know, see what you can do with it. All right, I'm going to undo that. So what I don't know if you noticed, but as this face was spinning, do you kind of see how it's kind of not really rotating on the middle of the head? It's the middle of the object, but because this bandana is out here, it throws the center of the object off a little bit. Which is fine, except for I would rather it spin right there. So I could change the anchor point, hit A for anchor point, and just slide the X over till it's right in between the two eyes. Then I could do the same thing with the other guy. The anchor point's right there. Let's make him or her. Put that anchor point right in between the eyes there. Now let's adjust the position of the one so that it's right over the top of the other. One way I do this, there's a couple different ways. I usually just change the opacity of one so that I can nudge it over with my arrow keys until they look like they're pretty much aligned, and then turn the top one back up to 100%. So they're sitting right over the top of each other now. All right, now let's add our rotation. But see their anchor points? They're in slightly different places, okay? Because those two objects are different sizes. How would you propose rotating these around so they rotate around the same point rather than their own individual anchor points?
Somehow make them the exact same object. Merge the layers.
Yeah, how would you essentially make them? Yeah, you could parent one to the other. You could make a null object and have them both follow the null. Let me start by just trying parenting the top layer to the bottom layer. Oh no, actually I like where the anchor point is on that one. Let's parent the bottom layer to the top layer. And now let's see how we like that rotation. Okay, that looks pretty good. I like that. So the parenting works in this situation. Otherwise I'd take a null object, put it in the middle of the circle, and then do the rotation. Have them both follow the null object.
I almost had a question.
You could double nest it. you could turn both of these two into a pre-comp and then rotate that comp around, but then that's an extra composition you don't need. All right, so let's keyframe this rotation setting. For rotation, Let's turn on keyframes there. Go to the very end. Have it rotate around 2 times. That's it. Oh, I did it to the wrong layer. Whoops. All right. I'm going to go back to the beginning where everything is 0 and just turn off keyframing for the Y value on that. It's already on for that one. So let's go to the end, turn that to 2, and now they should just rotate around each other. Okay.
I have a quick question. Like when it's mirrored to the other side, the bandana is still in front of the hand, even though it shouldn't be. Is there any way to get around that?
Yes, that's the next thing.
Oh.
So right now, there was a note made that as the bandana spins around, it looks like you should be going to the backside and seeing the backside, but the bandana is still on top. That's because technically these two objects are occupying the same space, which means the layer stacking order takes over. And because the bandana layer is on top, it's always going to show up on top because they're in the exact same place in space. But I'm going to do one better. I'm actually going to use opacity settings. I'm not going to use expressions. I'm just going to do this the manual way. Right now, I want to see the top one, okay? Which means the top one needs to be an opacity of 100%. I don't want to see the bottom one, because as it flips over, I'm going to reveal the bottom one and disappear the bandana one. So right now, the opacity on the bottom one should be 0, so I can only see the bandana one. Then, right when it gets to this point right here, that last frame before it flips over, I'm going to add a keyframe on the opacity of both of them, advance 1 frame, and swap them so that the top one becomes 0 and the bottom one becomes 100. So then it magically, woo, swaps. Then I do the same thing here, and here's a little bit of a shortcut for this. If I copy these 2 keyframes, Command C, Command V, right there, copy those 2, Command C, Command V, select all 4 of those keyframes, right-click, Keyframe Assistant, Time Reverse Keyframes. That'll swap them back right there. Now, because this is rotating at a constant speed, hopefully, if I go right here, I can grab all 4 of these, Command C, Command V, Command C, Command V, and it worked. Now I have a 5-second animation of this little thing going like that. Now, I accidentally named this one Comp 1, so let's call this one. I accidentally put it inside there also. So I'm going to hit the hard return up here with it highlighted and call this Smiley Rotate. Go back to my Rocker Dude master, put Smiley Rotate in there. Now it's just rotating. Now I can add some position keyframes and drag it down, go to the beginning, put it up at the top. Now I just, okay. Just have fun with stuff. The more psychedelic you make it, the happier you're gonna make me. Honestly, like,
Challenge accepted.
yeah, just make it
Just don't
crazy.
give them the secret.
Have him rock out, you know. But the thing is, it all needs to for the genre, it needs to be appropriate. Does that make sense? So like, if it looks like you were high when you animated it, then it'll be good. But it needs to all kind of fit in with the jive that you're going for. You know, like when the rocker dude's arms rock, he needs to look like he's really rocking. I don't want to just see like the arms randomly just like a Gumby dancer. Okay, random movement in the arms isn't as cool as, you know, in out, you know, synchronized movement. Anyway, yeah. So this peace sign could come in, do like a. You can add scale keyframes here. Move that over. Change that to 0. Have it do kind of this little bounce effect. Then go back down to 0. Add easing to all of those. And then see what happens. Okay.
The key command for easing all of those, what was that? Oh,
F9. Yeah. Then you could just duplicate that a whole bunch of times. And then move each one of these to a different spot. Okay, yeah. So have fun. It's supposed to be fun, and make it cool. And like I say, this assignment, it was okay because we got this one little spinning object down here. It is swapping. We got the flowers flying around, the peace sign, or rocking out in the background, back and forth. Rocker dudes bebopping back and forth. I think my intention and my instructions were that the rays would come in, all this stuff would start happening, and then the rocker dude would fly in, jam for like a second, and then fly back out again. So that everything kind of culminates in him going, yeah, and then leaving again. So, yeah. Anyway, that should more than get you going on the rocker dude assignment.